A Venezuelan Navy patrol squadron slipped out of Puerto Cabello under strict radio silence. 4 fast boats, each armed with 12.7mm heavy machine guns and, well, aging Soviet-era 73mm launchers. Their orders were simple: intercept the American warship they believed was entering Bolivarian waters. What they didn't know was that their intel was already outdated. The vessel they thought they were tracking wasn't a lone destroyer at all. It was the USS Dwight D. Eisenhower, a 100,000-ton nuclear-powered floating airbase escorted by 6 fully armed warships. By 5:21 a.m., radar operators aboard the Eisenhower picked up faint contacts to the south. Small, fast, and poorly coordinated. Not commercial, not fishing boats. Something else. Bridge, combat. 4 surface contacts, 27 miles and closing. The carrier's captain responded calmly, "Copy. Light them up." Within moments, the USS Gravely and USS Mason shifted course, sliding into a defensive wedge ahead of the carrier. The formation tightened. Phalanx and CRAM turrets spun to standby. The tension on deck made it obvious. This looked like a potential hostile approach. The Venezuelan lead boat, NA-23, pushed past 40 knots. Its captain still thought he was approaching a lone American destroyer. His radar operator hadn't noticed the massive return looming behind it, the carrier itself. At 5:48 a.m., the Venezuelan squadron finally broke radio silence. "You are entering Bolivarian waters. Alter course immediately." Silence from the American side. Just static. 3 minutes later, the patrol boats crept into visual range. And in that moment, every sailor on the NA-23 understood the gravity of their mistake. They weren't staring at a destroyer. They were staring at a U.S. aircraft carrier protected by an entire strike group. Warships already tracking them with fire control systems. The Venezuelans hadn't stumbled across just any American ship. They had charged straight toward one of the most lethal naval formations on Earth, a U.S. Navy carrier strike group. At its center sat the Dwight D. Eisenhower, call sign Ike, nuclear-powered. 4.5 acres of armored flight deck, nearly 70 aircraft. To her crew, she's a floating city. To anyone reckless enough to provoke her, she's a steel storm waiting to break. Flanking her were 2 Arleigh Burke-class destroyers, Gravely and Mason, each carrying over 90 vertical launch cells loaded with Tomahawk cruise missiles, SM defenses, and Sea Sparrows. Further out sailed the Ticonderoga-class cruiser Philippine Sea, scanning hundreds of miles around. Above them, 2 MH-60R Seahawk helicopters swept the water with dipping sonar, radar, and infrared cameras. The carrier's Combat Information Center fused everything, radar, sonar, satellite feeds, into a single massive picture of the battle space. The moment the Venezuelan boats appeared, every ship saw them at once. They were tagged instantly. Skunk Alpha 1 through 4. Unknown. Fast. Heading north. 40+ knots. The order went out. Maintain course. Do not engage unless fired upon. It's a simple principle. The U.S. Navy doesn't shoot first. They let you get close enough to understand just how badly you've miscalculated. At 5:52, Gravely's radar operator leaned forward. Contact accelerating. Bearing steady. No course change. That single update snapped the entire combat center into high alert. On the main screen, 4 blips marched steadily toward the formation, just 22 miles out now. They weren't maneuvering like smugglers. Smugglers avoid detection. These boats were charging in hard. The Gravely's captain gave the next instruction, broadcast on Maritime Emergency Channel. The radio operator keyed up unidentified Venezuelan vessels. This is a United States Navy warship. You are operating in international waters. Alter course immediately. Still nothing. Then the Venezuelan formation split. 2 boats low and straight, 2 swinging wide in a pincer pattern. That wasn't random. That was practiced. Up on Eisenhower's flight deck, crew chiefs scrambled to prep another MH-60 Romeo. Its mission, get eyes on the targets. Within minutes, the Seahawk was slicing through the humid Caribbean air. It climbed to 500 feet. Visual contact. 4 fast patrol craft, approximately 45 feet, painted navy gray, Venezuelan flags, forward-mounted weapons. The video feed streamed to every ship. The wakes cut razor white toward the strike group. At 6:01, the Venezuelan lead boat locked onto radar Echo 2. Their intel brief claimed Echo 2 was a lone U.S. destroyer operating without carrier support, perfect for a warning run. The plan was simple: buzz close, fire a few bursts into open water, film the moment, and hand the footage to state media. Caracas wanted a propaganda clip showing their Navy standing up to the Americans. But their intel was 2 days old. Echo 2 wasn't alone anymore. Overnight, the entire strike group had moved. The Echo they were chasing wasn't a destroyer. It was the Eisenhower herself. From the NA-23's bridge, the shape rising over the horizon looked wrong. Too big, too flat, too tall. The radar return filled the whole scope. The captain hesitated, thinking it was 2 ships together. Then aircraft elevators and deck lights gave it away. They were staring at a U.S. aircraft carrier. By now, the strike group was at full alert. Gravely and Mason moved to block. Helicopters hovered overhead. Every sensor aboard the Eisenhower locked onto the small craft. Still determined to complete their demonstration, the Venezuelans fired 2 short bursts into the water. Not aimed, just for show. But to a U.S. carrier on high alert, muzzle flashes aren't symbolic. Gravely's fire control radar locked instantly. Multiple American weapon systems illuminated the patrol boats. Inside the Venezuelan cabins, alarms shrieked, missile lock tones they'd never heard before. In under a minute, they understood everything. They hadn't intimidated an American ship. They had threatened a nuclear-powered carrier strike group, with live weapons at the ready. The Venezuelan commander finally shouted over the radio, his voice shaking, "Cease approach! Cease approach! Disengage!" But calm words weren't going to stop what had already begun. At 6:03, the Eisenhower's Combat Directions Center shifted to full combat posture. There were no chaotic alarms, just a firm, steady announcement, Condition 1. Weapons release authorized for self-defense. Aboard the Gravely, sailors manned the 5-inch gun. The phalanx CIWS turret whirred, tracking the incoming boats automatically, its barrel spinning at thousands of rounds per minute, ready to turn the sea into white fire. Above, the Seahawk dropped to 200 feet, keeping eyes on the patrols. Its sensor operator could see men aboard the NA-23, bandanas, helmets, fingers tight on triggers. Then the pilot heard a tone in his headset. Venezuelan fire control radar had locked onto the Gravely. That was the final trigger. Bridge, we are painted. Copy, maintain eyes. Do not engage unless fired upon. Inside the Eisenhower, the tactical action officer went through the rules of engagement. U.S. policy couldn't be clearer. Do not start a fight. But if one starts, end it fast. A tense minute passed. Every gunner, every radar tech, every sailor waited in absolute silence. The Venezuelan boats slowed, just barely. Then one surged again, skimming the water at 45 knots straight toward Gravely's bow. "Standby countermeasures," came the call. Chaff pods armed, laser designators warmed up. One mistake, one burst too close, and everything could end in seconds. Gravely's captain kept his hand steady. He knew the math: 4 small boats versus 2 destroyers and a carrier. This wasn't a fight. It was a suicide note. The Seahawk reported a vessel had broken formation, then another. Radar returns began fading one by one. The standoff was breaking slowly, but not peacefully. The American guns stayed hot. The radios stayed cold because everyone aboard knew that turning away didn't mean it was over. One Venezuelan boat, hull number 23, swung wide and looped back toward the carrier's southern flank. Whether from confusion, pride, or poor comms, nobody knew. To the Americans watching on radar, it looked like an attack run. "Contact closing fast," came the call. Every ship snapped into defensive geometry. Mason moved between the carrier and the approaching contact. CIWS and missile hatches began to open. One wrong move and this could become a very short war. From the air, the Seahawk pilot called out. The lead Venezuelan boat was turning inside Mason's wake, distance about 1.5 nautical miles, seconds away in naval time. Inside Mason's combat center, the tactical watch officer's voice was calm but firm. If that boat crossed 1,000 yards, engage with a warning burst. As the craft raced closer, Mason fired 2 green flares, the standard U.S. Navy signal to turn away now. No response. Then the Venezuelan gunner made a mistake that almost triggered everything. He racked the charging handle on his deck gun. One metallic sound, picked up by the Seahawk's microphone. Muzzle movement confirmed, the pilot called. Target within 900 yards. Gravely's captain raised his hand. Hold fire just a second longer. Suddenly, the Venezuelan boat veered hard to port, engine screaming as it peeled away, throwing up white spray. The others followed. The formation broke. Contacts retreating, came the update. All units stand down weapons. Maintain tracking. It had been a minute from a gunfight neither side wanted, yet both were seconds from starting one. By dawn, the sea was empty again. No Venezuelan boats in sight, no engine echoes on sonar. The strike group held course, speed 20 knots, heading north. But the fight had shifted to another battlefield, the political one. 2 hours later, Venezuelan state media released a short, grainy video showing patrol boats racing across open water, overlaid with narration claiming they had repelled an American incursion. In Washington, the Pentagon quickly published satellite images and full radar logs, showing the U.S. group had been operating in international waters more than 80 miles from Venezuelan territory. The Navy called it reckless brinkmanship. Caracas called it sovereign defense. Both sides were technically right and both utterly unwilling to back down. Diplomats scrambled behind the scenes to cool things off. No shots fired, no injuries, just a near miss. But sailors knew the truth. The difference between a near miss and a war can be as small as a misunderstood radio call or a nervous finger on a trigger. By the next day, the Eisenhower strike group quietly shifted farther north. The Venezuelan boats returned to port under radio silence. Publicly, both nations moved on, but everyone at sea understood this wouldn't be the last close call in those waters. People assume warships can see everything. In reality, the ocean hides mistakes better than any battlefield. At night or in low light, a destroyer and a carrier can look nearly identical on a small radar screen. Massive steel hulls, similar radar returns, and complex electromagnetic noise bouncing off waves. Add poor weather, tired operators, and aging equipment, and your target suddenly isn't what you think it is. That's what happened here. Venezuelan patrol crews were relying on shore-fed radar data, not live ship sensors. Their coordinates came from a static grid that hadn't accounted for the carrier group's overnight repositioning. In the Caribbean, even a 30-mile shift can turn a routine patrol into a confrontation. When governments mix politics with poor situational awareness, things get dangerous fast. Naval officers call it threat mirroring. Each side interprets the other's moves as aggression, even when they're defensive. Modern navies rely on human judgment just as much as on technology. One misread radar echo or one misheard transmission can spiral into an international crisis before anyone says the word fire. Official reports later called it a routine encounter. The sailors who were there called it something else, the closest they'd come to firing live rounds outside wartime. Looking back, it's hard not to wonder how thin that line really is. One flare, one wrong radar lock, one commander losing his nerve. That's all it takes to turn a tense standoff into headlines nobody wants to write. At sea, there is no replay button. Once you commit, you live with the outcome. So here's the question for you. You're on the bridge, alarms screaming, 4 fast boats tearing straight toward your ship at 40 knots. Do you hold fire and risk getting hit, or squeeze the trigger first? Drop your answer below. I want to see how you'd call that one. Thanks for watching.